Show you today how to do the shading and how to think about things like where your shoestring, okay, goes into your shoe, like this area. Whenever you have an area like this where you have what we call a recessed area, it creates a shadow. When you have one piece of fabric, even on a white shoe like this one, if I have a white shoestring on top of white fabric, it's going to cast a shadow. I also today want to talk to you guys about the detail that you see in the things like the shoelaces. This is not just a solid white piece of material. As you can see, it has a texture to it. When we're looking at a shoe like this one, okay, very different kind of shoe, same things are going on though. In a shoe like this one with a lot of Converse shoes, the eyelet itself is a really important part in the detailing of the shoe. It looks very metallic, it looks shiny, and it has a deep recessed area. Also notice again, wherever there's overlap, there's a cast shadow. So areas get really dark where you see one piece of fabric overlap another. Also pay attention to the stitching on the shoe, okay? We said last week that stitches resemble more like a grain of rice. They have a thickened film, like you can see here, rather than a straight line. So how do we go about starting our shading? I'm going to be working with this kind of format and using this shoe for the eyelet to kind of give you an idea of how to go about doing that. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about shading in general. Shading is a fancy word that we use in drawing to mean adding the darks and lights into our image to make it look more realistic. Okay, so what I'm doing here, now this shoe that I originally was using was a student shoe, as my example, and it did not have metal eyelets, but I'm adding these because I really want to show you guys how to do those. So let's say that I've sketched this out. Let's say that I went in and did all of my measuring and I checked for accuracy and I made sure everything was accurate. Now what I want to do is I want to intentionally guide my viewer through my drawing. If you look at a drawing like this one, for example, you can see that the artist has come in and added lots of grays, or what we call shading. Next Thursday of this week, we're going to talk about the more professional name for that, which is value ranges. But you can see that this artist has really paid attention to all of the textures that they see in the shoe. This artist paid attention to the darks and lights and the texture as well. Very different kind of drawing, but we can see that they are really paying attention to what they're seeing. Notice the extreme difference in the darks and lights in this particular shoe. This was a black shoe. If you're doing a shoe that is white, then your values or your darks and lights will be slightly more subtle, okay? So how do we go about, first of all, adding in a little bit of value? Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is think about my overlap. If I have, for example, a shoelace that overlaps one side to another, that's going to cast a little bit of a shadow. To do my shadows, I'm going to use the side of my pencil and apply just a little bit of graphite. Now, a lot of you who have white shoes are not going to add a whole lot of this. This is just very subtle. You just want to indicate where some of the layers of your fabric on your shoe overlap. There are two different ways that you can use a pencil. You can use the side of the pencil to create a light gray like I'm doing here. You can also use the point of the pencil. When you're using the point and applying pressure with that will create what we call an emphasis point. An emphasis point is what is going to capture your viewer's visual attention more. When you're using the point of your pencil, you're going to press harder. I'm also, as I'm pulling away from this mark, I'm using a circular motion with my pencil. And I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing here. So if I come in with the point of my pencil, and then I use a circular motion and I press harder, pressure is very important in this kind of drawing process as well. When I press harder, it's going to create a darker mark. I'm then letting that gradually fade into that light gray that I did with the side of my pencil. You want those two areas to merge together. Hopefully you can see from looking at this that this area pops forward more. You can see it more clearly. If this edge overlaps, I'm going to come in and decide where do I want my viewer to really visualize and see the shoe the most clearly. That's going to be your emphasis area. Emphasis areas tend to be tied to overlap of fabric or darker value areas. So I'm pressing harder. There's a dark shadow in this little crevice in the eyelet here. When I'm doing the shadow for under the shoestring, because there is a shadow that's cast, I'm not going to press as hard. Okay, so you're varying your pressure. I can get very, very soft grays simply by changing how hard or firm I press down with my pencil. And you're also going to be looking at the object itself. Okay, when I'm looking at an object like this reflective quality of this eyelet, I need to kind of see where does it look darker and where does it look lighter. Visually, your eye is going to be attracted to those dark areas in a drawing. That's why we call them emphasis points. And you get to use that as the artist to control what they see, or what they see first. Hopefully at home you can see that by coming in and adding little bits of pressure changes and darker areas or emphasis points, making certain areas pop forward. Can those of you in class see this at least, so I can get a little bit of feedback from you guys? Is that kind of making sense to everybody? Awesome. So now let's talk about fabric textures and subtle things. Okay, so we've got emphasis points. You do that by pressing harder and creating darks. How do we create really subtle textures, like maybe the texture that you see in this shoelace? Okay, or even more subtle, the texture that you would see in a white shoelace, like this one, okay, and the white fabric that you have here. Well, the first thing that you want to do is you don't want to pretend that it doesn't exist. If you see it, then we have to try to draw it. So what we're going to do first to create a very subtle texture, there are multiple approaches that we can use. One method is to start by creating a light base gray first, like we already started on this shoe. And I'm going to add a little bit more gray quickly so that we can come in and see how this works. I would also advise you guys to get into the habit of having a second piece of drawing paper under your drawings, especially when you're using the side of a pencil or a graphite stick when you're drawing with one of if you're rubbing on the side like this, if there was something under this paper on the table, it would leave a mark in your drawing. So sometimes we can actually let the pencil itself create a texture. So simply by doing this, it's leaving kind of a texture on my drawing surface. But let's say that this is not dark enough. Maybe I need to see the pattern a little bit more intently. What I would do before I create my pattern is I would want to blend down this gray area to create a kind of a neutral mid-range gray. To do that, I can use several drawing tools. One tool that students tend to call blending stumps looks like this. This is an example of a blending stump. A blending stump, or its actual name is a tortillon, is a device for simply smearing and blending graphite or pencil on a piece of paper to make it look smooth. Now, for those of us in class, I can let kids use one of these, but let's say you're at home and you don't have a blending stump. What are some other options for you? One great option is to use something like a simple tissue or a piece of paper towel, okay? You could also take a simple piece of drawing paper, curl it around your pencil like this so that it gets curved. Then pull the pencil out and tighten that curl so that you get something with a point on it. I'm going to show you how to curl one of these real quickly. And the reason I'm taking the time to do this is because when you're at home, you're not going to probably have a tortillon or a blending stump. So I'm simply furling my paper to give me a device that looks like this, has a little point on it. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to simply rub my paper. Now, many students have kind of picked up on ways to create smooth edges by simply taking their finger, and they'll blend with their finger. The one drawback of using your finger, I'm going to put some extra paper under here for cushion. The drawback of using your hands and your fingers to blend for pencil is that our hands have a natural oil and moisture in them, which we can't do anything about. And if you are blending with a hand that has oil on it, or some kind of liquid from like sweat on your hand or lotion, it will create a stain on your paper. And I want to show you that these work very much the same way. So you can see that this is creating the same kind of effect. You can blend with either one. And now I hope that you notice that really smoothed out the texture. What this will also do is camouflage and soften your lines. So if you start to lose your lines, you may have to come back in with a really nice, sharp, pointed pencil and create some of those edges or those emphasis points again so we can see them. Now you might say at this point, Miss T, why don't we just come in and do a super dark outline around everything to begin with? And the reason for that is if you have what we call equal pressure harsh lines that go around everything, it's going to resemble more of like a contour line or a flat pattern. And we don't want that in three-dimensional drawings. So now that I've got a flat base gray, I have the option of coming in and creating a texture. Let's say that I have a canvas kind of shoe. By taking my pencil and creating texture marks like this, I could create a texture that way. But what if my texture is more of a reverse texture? Maybe my texture is mostly white. You can come in with your pencil eraser, and you can come in and create thin lines with your pencil. And then I could come back, let's say it's a cross pattern like this. Then I could come in and emphasize maybe the recessed areas in that. Maybe this is a fabric that has like a weave to it and it has a layer of mesh over the top. I could come in and define that edge. Okay, are you guys able to see the differences in what I'm doing, or is it really soft? Can you see it kind of? Hopefully. I hope that's working for you. Okay. Same thing, let's say that your shoe is almost white. We can come in and do the weave pattern on our shoelaces like this. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of things that I want you thinking about today. Let's say, though, that you have a leather shoe that doesn't have fabric on it. And I'm going to just cover this up. That's the cool thing about blending stumps. I can experiment with an area and then cover it. Let's say that my shoe is just made of leather and it just has some wrinkles in it. Maybe my shoe just is kind of old and it looks creased. Okay, what you could do for that kind of scenario is wherever you're looking at those wrinkles, there's area that's lighter. We call areas that are lighter in our drawings, we call that highlight. And then there's going to be the darker areas around it. We call those areas the shadows. So I'm going to come in and do a mixture of some darks and lights to imply creases or wrinkles in my leather for my shoe. What you want to make sure that you're doing is varying the pressure of your lines. Vary the pressure of your lines. Okay?